Thank you, Jason, for the introduction and for your work. Y'all might think he works for me or something, um, and he does. And by the way, he does a tremendous job. And I appreciate the work that he and all the folks at DNR do. And really, when it comes to the energy transition to a lower carbon future, it's really an all of government approach. It's not just DNR. It's not just the energy office. It is all across state government. As y'all know, y'all work with DOTD, but it's in every agency that we have. Um, I think it's very important for reasons that I'm going to get into. But I want to start by thanking all of you all. Thanks, Ann, for the introduction, but all of you for the work that you're doing here in Louisiana and elsewhere around the country. So this is the eighth and final year of my second term as governor. Um, I am very proud of the way that we have grown our economy, diversified our economy, and the work that we're doing to address climate change and save our coast through a commitment to clean energy. And those two things really do go hand in hand because there's an awful lot of capital being deployed to these technologies and to these efforts. And if we embrace that transition, and by the way, you should do that because the transition is going to happen whether you embrace it or not. But by embracing it, then you facilitate the flow of that capital, that investment to Louisiana. And jobs get created here rather than elsewhere because companies can achieve their own internal goals here. Those CEOs are being held responsible for that by their shareholders and board members. And so it's a virtuous cycle, but you got to embrace it. And the sooner you do it, the better positioned you are. And everyone loves to talk about creating jobs. I'm certainly one of those people. We've had over the last 24 months, I think it is, every month when we get new numbers on unemployment, they were actually lower than they were a year before, that same month a year before. We've got the last month that we have right now is February. There's a little delay in the March numbers, which I think we get Friday, but the slowest February ever measured in Louisiana. A part of this, not all of it, but a part of it is this effort that we're doing to transition to a cleaner environment, to low and no carbon fuels, and especially going forward. This is going to be even more important. And I want to wish you good luck as you collaborate on developing best practices as it relates to fleet acquisition, fleet management, fleet fueling, because I think over the course of the near future, individuals are going to have to make decisions about whether their next vehicle purchase is going to be an electric vehicle or not. And that battle will be won or lost, and it's going to be won. It's a question of how fast it happens. But that's going to be one vehicle per decision. When you own and manage a fleet in one or more states, that decision is huge. And so we want to make sure that you all are successful and that you can be successful in Louisiana. And we want to learn from you all because we have our own fleets. Whether you are DOTD or DEQ, I've got my former DEQ secretary back here, Chuck Carr-Brown. Great to have you with us. Jason mentioned to you that we established the Climate Initiatives Task Force here in Louisiana to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The only such task force in the Gulf South. The only climate action plan in the Gulf South, and the only Gulf South state to actually embrace that net zero by 2050 goal. We're doing it with an all of the above approach, and that means renewable energy leaders. We're at the table alongside oil and gas companies, environmental folks, folks from the state government, all the different trade associations, with a goal of improving the health and welfare of the people of Louisiana, advancing our energy profile, and that all of the above strategy has driven new energy investments in Louisiana. And I wish I could tell you because a lot of it is still confidential. Final investment decisions haven't been made. But there are so many things that are on the board in terms of potential, and I believe most of that will happen. New investments in Louisiana, and we're not talking about $50,000 investments. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about billions of dollars coming to our state. I do believe that we've emerged as a global leader a global leader in the energy transition and a major international player, for example, in the LNG market. And that's going to benefit us because we've been an energy state and we've been known as an energy state for 100 years. If we want to be an energy state 30 years from now, 40 years from now, then we better do the things that we're talking about. Otherwise, the investment's not going to come here. So this is incredibly important for us. We're excited about the potential for acceleration of the development of offshore wind energy in the Gulf. Quite frankly, my goal is to see wind turbine platforms out in the Gulf, not too distant from our oil and gas platforms. That's part of that all of the above approach. And then over the years, as throughout the transition, there will be fewer and fewer fossil fuels and more renewable. But this is what progress looks like at the outset. That's why in November 2020, Louisiana requested that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, stand up an intergovernmental task force to evaluate the potential of the northern Gulf of Mexico for renewable energy development. They did so, and they invited Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi to join us. It's also important for us that we figure out how to share the revenue that's generated out of federal waters, just like we do with traditional energy production in the Gulf. But the concept of floating offshore wind infrastructure will bring with it great opportunities and great challenges. But they're challenges that we're used to dealing with in Louisiana because much of the knowledge and the skills are transferable from the traditional oil and gas industry. You know, if you can fabricate a oil and gas platform, you can do the same thing for wind. And if you're servicing oil and gas platforms, you can service wind platforms. If you're building vessels for the first, you can actually build vessels that are for wind as well. And y'all know this is not theoretical. We had about 8 Louisiana companies that were integrally involved as well, and the Block Island wind farm off of Rhode Island. So we're excited about this opportunity for us. But as you know, we're pushing forward on a number of fronts, from hydrogen energy to wind to solar. We're addressing how to reduce the carbon footprint of traditional fuels as we transition from the energy sources of the past and today to what comes next. I think Jason spoke to you all about our hydrogen initiative, especially HALO. That application is in. Our fingers are crossed. I feel very good about the prospects. We're one of the few applications, and in fact, I don't know whether there are any others that have multiple states coming together, but we're partnering with Arkansas and with Oklahoma. And one of the reasons we did that is we are particularly interested in hydrogen being a fuel source for long-haul trucking. And so you have multiple companies, especially in Arkansas. You've got Tyson, you've got Walmart, you've got Hunt, JB Hunt. All of those trucks that you see on the road every single day. We think that hydrogen is a fuel source for them long before we will ever get them to operate on electricity. So we're excited about that. Fingers are crossed. But hopefully by the end of the year, right, Jason? We will find out that we've been successful, and hopefully, you know, somewhere between 800 million and 1.25 billion. We'd like that number to be the 1.25 billion is what we will be awarded for that effort. And this is all important because our state has been more adversely affected by climate change than any other state in the nation. And I don't just say it. It's objectively true. If you look at storm damage, go back to 1980 and on a per capita basis, or however you want to look at it, you just look at the dollar value of storm damage, compare Louisiana, contrast Louisiana to other states. We are most adversely affected. 2,000 square miles of our coast have been lost since 1930. That's a football field every hour and a half. Subsidence, sea level rise, and then the marsh, the coast gets weakened, and then every time you have a new storm, you lose more coast. And we know that climate change is real. I believe that human behavior is adversely affecting that. It's accelerating it. It may not be the only cause, but we have an obligation, I think, in Louisiana to address it because we are more adversely affected than anybody else, but also because we contribute more than our fair share of CO2 because of chemical manufacturing and refining, in addition to power generation and vehicles and so forth. And in fact, you're in the only state in the country right now, the only one, where more than 50% of our CO2 emissions don't come from power generation. They come from chemical manufacturing and refining. So we know that we have to take this seriously. And for all of those reasons, including the investment, the job creation, and so forth, this is really important for us. And by the way, it's important for others too. That other states get hurricanes, other states are having wildfires. We went through a year last year for the first time in over 3 decades. We had no named storm hit Louisiana. And in December, I was so thankful for that. And we woke up one day and we had 11 tornadoes in 24 hours. So I mean, it's just the world that we live in. But electric vehicles, and I think that's what probably most of you are involved in. That obviously is going to be a huge part of going forward here in Louisiana and elsewhere around the country. And there are opportunities now that, quite frankly, we didn't have before. And if you inventory all those opportunities under the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, under the Inflation Reduction Act, there's an awful lot of assistance available out there to accelerate the timeline. Y'all know that the IIJA passed Congress in late 2021. There's about $73 million in federal funding to go towards electric vehicle charging infrastructure here in Louisiana, with $10.8 million allocated in 2022 and about $15 million each year going through 2026. I already told you we're trying to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, but we have intermediate goals as well. And the first intermediate goal is 2025, when we're looking for a 26 to 28% reduction from those 2005 levels. And electric vehicles be a big part of that. And if you pay attention, there's a lot of low carbon technologies and initiatives out there so that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, our CO2 emissions. And quite often they will try to explain the magnitude of what they can accomplish by relating it in terms of the equivalent of how many internal combustion engines would be taken off the road. And so that's a wonderful thing that we do that, but it also makes sense that where we can, we take the internal combustion engines off the road as well. And that's where we know the electric vehicles are going to make the biggest difference. The National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, funds available for expenditure by state transportation agencies cover up to 80% of the expenses to install electric vehicle charging stations throughout the state, with a minimum 20% match that has to be covered by the grant recipients. In Louisiana, DOTD is going to acquire the minimum 20% match through a competitive application process for grant recipients to own, install, and maintain these charging stations at locations outside of DOTD's right-of-way. We're going to begin soliciting applications for the EV infrastructure program once the Federal Highway Administration has approved it. Our application is pending. and DOTD is awaiting feedback so that they can proceed. They're going to select the first round of grant recipients later this year, after which we're going to monitor and inspect installations, identify and correct weaknesses in the grant programs for use in future rounds of solicitations and awards. Because just like you all, every time we do something, we learn, and there's probably a better way, a more efficient way, more effective way. So that's what they're going to be doing here in Louisiana at DOTD. Consultants at Louisiana Clean Fuels and Grant Management Group are actually under contract with DOTD to assist with the planned deployment and public outreach. I think that contract goes for another year through April 2024. We're expecting the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation to announce resubmittal of all state EV deployment plans later this year, in addition to round 7 of alternative fuel corridor nominations, which is another opportunity to propose additional routes where charging stations can be placed. And the consultants are going to assist with these efforts as well. We're also working towards a disaster resilience plan for EV infrastructure and coordination with regional rural development offices to meet Justice 40 goals, an initiative created by the Biden administration to confront and address decades of underinvestment in disadvantaged communities, and the Louisiana Workforce Commission to ensure the availability of registered apprenticeship programs. We really want to have all of this effort facilitate career opportunities for people who in the past may have been left out by initiatives such as those that we're undertaking. Again, we're protecting the environment and creating jobs. Our goal is to have a charging station every 50 miles or less along the designated alternative fuel corridors. We know that there's too much at stake to rest on our laurels. We can't stray from the course. I think we're making tremendous progress, but we are very early in this effort, and we understand that. And the 8 years that I've been governor, and really over the course of the last 2 or 3, we've had the most movement. But I think the next 8 or 10 years are going to be absolutely critical here and elsewhere in the country. And this is one of those areas, and it's generally true no matter what you're talking about, but success begets success. Every time we're successful doing something along the lines of what we're talking about, the technology is just going to get better, and it's going to get cheaper, and we're going to be able to go further and further. And I don't think you have to figure out every way that everything that you have to do to achieve your goal by 2050 before you take the first step. Because you'd never take the first step. You just got to commit to the goal, know that it's possible, know you're going to be diligent, and start doing those things that can be done. And that effort will accelerate over time. So I want to thank you all for being here, for the work that you do here in Louisiana, around the country. It really is important for our future. I think you know that. I think it can be rewarding personally because you know you're contributing to a better future for our children and grandchildren. You know that your work allows us to be better stewards of the environment, as I think God has called us to be. And so hopefully when you lay your head on the pillow at night, you take some comfort, some sense of satisfaction in that. In addition to all that, I believe it's going to be personally rewarding because of all that capital that is flowing in this direction as well. So it sort of checks all the boxes for us. But in order to keep that capital flowing, we have to be successful, and demonstrating success early is going to be really, really important. And there remain some folks who are skeptical about whether climate change is real, and if it's real, is human behavior contributing to it? How fast and what should we really invest towards low and no carbon fuels? And there's a lot of question around that. But nobody questions investment in job creation. Nobody questions when we lift people out of poverty and we expand opportunity and prosperity. And so when we demonstrate that all of this goes hand in hand, the skeptics might remain skeptic, but they're going to welcome what you're doing. And I think we can then have the sort of broad-based, bipartisan, full-throated support for these efforts that are going to be critical for success in the long run. But in order to do that, we need to demonstrate success at the highest scale possible as soon as possible. That's why y'all are here. So I thank you for your efforts. I wish you nothing but the best. God bless. Make sure you spend some money while you're here in the state. And we look forward to hosting you again. Thank you.